everybody, and welcome to our latest edition of our elections coverage. Tonight, we'll be covering the special election in Louisiana 2, specifically the runoff round. The second district is predominantly based around New Orleans and East Baton Rouge, stretching along the river parishes in between. Tonight's runoff is between State Senator Troy Carter, who is also the minority leader of the Louisiana State Senate, and his more progressive opponent, State Senator Karen Carter Peterson from the 5th Senate District. The two of them are facing off in this runoff to replace Cedric Richmond, the longtime Democratic congressman who resigned to take up a position in the Biden administration earlier this year. They both arrived at the runoff round following Karen Carter Peterson's narrow second-place finish over Gary Chambers, who did far better than expected, with Troy Carter finishing in first place. Since then, Carter has remained a favorite in the race, and it is likely, in our opinion, that Carter will win tonight, although theoretically anything can happen. Just some brief notes before we start the panel discussion on what to watch tonight. For a Carter victory, if Carter's doing very well in Jefferson Parish and manages to win more than half of the African-American vote, that should bode well for him tonight. Additionally, something that the Carter campaign has been watching is the GOP voters. Most of the voters who came out in the first round to vote for Claston Bernard or another GOP candidate, that whole block of Republican voters, combined with Troy Carter's voters from the first round, would in fact be enough to give Troy Carter a victory with about 53% in this runoff. So assuming even a somewhat decent amount of those Republicans come out, that's a good night for him. On the other hand, for Peterson, we'd be looking at an underperformance for Carter in his home, Jefferson, and a reduction overall in Carter's support. Maybe Peterson manages to get about half the black vote and really turns out the progressive whites that were split between her and Chambers in New Orleans. But we're also looking a lot at how well Karen Carter Peterson does in East Baton Rouge and the percentage of the Chambers vote that she manages to get. Because if she manages to get a decent amount of Chambers voters and they turn out in a high quantity, it could very well be enough to give her a victory. Although, again, Carter is favored. So right now, I guess we'll start off. I'll throw it over first to Eric to give his thoughts on the race here.
Yeah, this is going to be a really interesting race. Obviously, has a lot of impact on mostly internal Democratic politics. This is obviously a very Democratic district. It was always going to elect a Democrat, and particularly an African-American Democrat. The question was what stripe the Democrat would be. Someone like Carter is much more in line with the previous representative, Cedric Richmond, someone who's more favorable to the oil and gas industry, someone who's not necessarily a moderate, but is more in line with the party leadership and the baseline median Democrat, where someone like Carter Peterson is far more liberal. I think she mentioned something to the extent of she would always prioritize supporting progressive causes over supporting bipartisan or looking for bipartisan input on things. I would say that's not the approach that Cedric Richmond took. Richmond was known to have relationships with especially people like Steve Scalise, who's also represented the New Orleans area on the Republican side. So that's going to be really important to look at. I'm trying to load up the exact map of what we're looking for this district, but it's really, really it's going to be a really interesting race for those reasons. And again, we're really going to be paying attention to where these votes come from. This is mostly based around the New Orleans area, but it does stretch all the way up into Baton Rouge and a lot of these counties in between. So it's going to be a really important race to follow.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eric. And Kraz, do you have any thoughts to add on the race?
Yeah, so I think, Eric said a lot of good stuff, but yeah, it's going to be critically important seeing tonight, if Republicans come out. Obviously, it's a Dem versus Dem race, so we expect Republican turnout to have cratered. But if it maintains at least a little bit, that's going to be really good for Troy Carter. And more really, we're going to have to look, where the turnout is, and how each candidate is doing with various demographic groups. But yeah, I think Republican turnout, kind of ironically, is going to be key here tonight because if come out, Carter has a really good shot. Obviously, in DVD races, Dem versus Dem races, when there's not a clear, even with a clear ideological divide, but I think especially in cases where the ideological divide is a little bit less pronounced, you're going to see. You're going to see Republican turnout crater. So we'll see if that happens tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Kraz. And just a brief thing before Joe does our first results update, because we're getting some early votes in, those of which are going to be counted first, I would like to briefly mention from some sources I've heard that Republican turnout is only supposed to be down a little bit, a few points. So overall, Republican turnout is looking actually relatively strong here. And from those Republicans, I would estimate that it's about 80 to 20 for Carter or even more in terms of how they're breaking, which would be very good. Joe, do you have any thoughts on the race tonight?
Nothing more than I think maybe has already been said. Of course, I think both Kraz and Eric have said very crucially that it is going to potentially come down to, where do Republicans turn out and how do they turn out? I don't think Troy Carter necessarily has to have many Republican voters turn out tonight, but I think he needs, at the very least, some of them to turn out. He has certainly taken up the more moderate wing here compared to Karen Carter Peterson, who has gotten the endorsement from the left here. That's really important to think about, when you look at it. And it's hard to say that there's nothing really there yet for us here. But, I think Carter might be slightly favored here, but I think we could be in for a very tight runoff here. That I think really should divide between Democrats in their own party right now when it comes to primaries. And while you get to it too, I think this is kind of the first chance for Democrats to really maybe progressive Democrats to maybe try and find a seat in the Deep South. A lot of these Deep South Democrats are not on the progressive end. They're more on the establishment end. Karen Carter Peterson would certainly change that.
Thank you, Joe. And just a quick update on results so far. And first, before I want to preface this by thanking our friends at RRH, specifically Cynic or CINYC9, for providing us again with a precinct map that we're going to be using tonight, as well as early updated results from the Louisiana Secretary of State's page. And just to provide those before we throw it back to Eric, because he wants to make a previous comment. The results here, according to the Louisiana Board of Elections, show 5 out of 10 parishes having counted their absentees thus far, and it looks close. Currently, Troy Carter has 53.4% of the vote, about 3,000 votes. Carter Peterson with 46.5% of the vote, about 3,000 votes. So about a 53-47 lead for Troy Carter right now. Only 5,000 votes in, and this is just early vote out of the parishes. So 5 of our 10 parishes are reporting early votes now. And I'll throw it back to Eric briefly, and then we'll get back to a discussion of the results. And I know Joe's pretty keen on that, so we'll get back.
Yeah. Just to explain the baseline real quick for what we're talking about here, this is basically the map of the previous results of the last primary. For those who were not paying attention last time, which is reasonable because this wasn't really a high-profile race, the top 4 were Troy Carter, 36%, Karen Carter Peterson, 23%, Gary Chambers at 21%, a very respectable performance that we did not see coming. He was the other progressive in the race. And then Republicans Claston Bernard at 10%. A few other Republicans had reasonably high totals, but didn't really do much overall. Notice that Troy Carter did really well around Orleans Parish, Jefferson Parish, and then some of these central parishes in the middle that have African-American votes that are fairly high. Bernard did really well in the one Republican parish, St. Charles, but otherwise Troy Carter was the next one up there. And then Gary Chambers did well around Iberville, but the more progressive candidates you can see here, Chambers and Carter Peterson, did much better around the Baton Rouge area. So that's kind of the dynamic we're looking at here is the split between Baton Rouge area and the New Orleans area, which is the brunt of the district.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. And I just real quick in the comments on here, we're going to address some questions that we've had, and I'll throw it to the panel on those questions while we wait for more results to come in. But someone asked, do we have a map of live results? And again, I would highly recommend, if you want precinct results, going to the RRH site. And I'll also put the Twitter handle there so you can find Cynic as well, as some call him, or CINYC as others know him. And again, highly recommend that. So you can follow him on Twitter. You can also go to the link, and you'll be able to find the live map that we're going to be using throughout the night, which is currently ahead of Washington Post. But let's find our first question. And for the questions, I'll give my brief thoughts on them, but I really want to try and hear from you guys, the panel. And then Joe is going to be running our results updates tonight. So Joe can just feel free to chime in on our discussion whenever you have important results that you want to discuss. So first question from Matthew Tarr. what would you say are the odds that Peterson wins right now? So first off, from what I've ascertained, talking to a few sources and covering this race over the last month, I would say that it's probably a 60-70% chance that Carter wins at this point. Not impossible that Peterson wins, but a Carter win is looking more likely than a Peterson win. And I would say the odds are between a 5 and 10 point win for Carter, although we're going to have to see how the current results shape out because it's currently close. But for Peterson to beat Carter, number one, Carter would need low turnout in Jefferson Parish. That's one of the big things here. Peterson would need to do very well with all of the progressive whites in the northern part of New Orleans, the uptown region as it's called. Carter Peterson would need to do very well in East Baton Rouge, where Troy Carter suffered, frankly. Gary Chambers actually did very well out there. So did KCP. Joe, do you have a quick update? You're on mute.
The buttons
Joe,
are
we
not.
can't hear you.
Can you hear me
Oh, there
now?
you go.
Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I know you just mentioned East Baton Rouge. The early vote there, let me tell you, folks, it is not good news for Karen Carter Peterson. The early turnout there in East Baton Rouge, Paris, she only got 52% of the early vote. The early vote has been reportedly counted. According to John Couvillon, who is kind of election Twitter and Twitter's way of getting Louisiana politics, he said that KCP needed about 63% of that early vote. Again, she only got 52%. That is incredibly problematic for her, and that's not a good sign to start out the night.
And if things like that hold, it's definitely a sign that Peterson's odds of winning are going down. And on top of that, I know Kraz wants to mention something. So Kraz, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to kind of, add on to this, the reason that's bad, and we don't know if this pattern is going to hold, but at least in fall 2020, when you looked at early voting statistics, even in, especially in the Deep South, what you saw was that the voters that utilized early vote the most in almost every state were, yes, Democrats, but almost always college-educated white progressive Democrats, disproportionately utilized early votes. If you looked at the early voting statistics in North Carolina, Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh, these are the places with tons of early vote. And then you actually see a lot of the rural black counties in North Carolina, for example, have pretty good election day showings. So that's kind of just, for some people might not get it. Like that's why this is bad, because Karen Carter Peterson needs really lockstep high margins in progressive areas, and there's a place that just has it's uptown New Orleans and East Baton Rouge.
Mm-hmm. And just real quick to finish this point, on top of what you said, Kraz, the Gary Chambers vote is critical to Karen Carter Peterson. And we can assume right now that not only is the raw number the same as it was for Chambers last time, but she's probably not winning as high of a percentage of them as she would like. So quickly, I'll throw this question to Eric because I think we're going to alternate, but the whole panel can comment. We just want to get through as many as we can. So how close is this race expected to be?
This is expected to be relatively close, again, within a 5-10 percentage point range at minimum. Obviously, the big wild card here is, as we mentioned before, white voters, how they vote. If they vote overwhelmingly for Karen Carter Peterson, where the Gary Chambers voters go, those are very important voters here, and where the Republican vote goes. Because the Republicans, they don't make up a lot of this district, but their vote doesn't matter. And in a 5 to 10 percentage point race in a district where that'd be generous for Republicans to get that turnout here, that could really matter. There have been elections where that has mattered. I think Kraz could name one off the top of his head, but it has made an impact before. And actually, in New Orleans, the opposite has happened, or in Louisiana, the opposite has happened. You've had elections that are R versus R, where black Democratic voters have decided which Republican is winning. It's a really interesting contrast here.
Yeah, I think that's very notable. I think a great example of the opposite happening, where people are crossing over as independents, particularly the African-American vote in a Republican primary, was actually Thad Cochran versus Chris McDaniel in the Mississippi Senate primary. Cochran initially lost, but was saved in the runoff. But a quick question I'll address here and throw it to the panel. Can Carter Peterson win the runoff while losing the black vote? So I'll briefly just go over the coalitions based off of race here and which candidates they're backing. So the white Republicans, those of which are coming out to vote, are overwhelmingly breaking for Carter. We know that. But from what I've heard, the black vote is roughly split this time between Carter Peterson and Carter. And while Carter Peterson is doing better with progressive whites, especially in uptown New Orleans, but also in East Baton Rouge, it's interesting to look at because it really depends which candidate does win the black vote here. But really, all Carter needs to win is about half or more of the black vote going to Carter, and those white Republicans in the river counties outside of the progressive white zone of uptown New Orleans coming out to vote for him. That's the easiest coalition for Carter to win. So I would say at this point, Carter Peterson, she would probably want to win the black vote if she were to win the runoff. That's my personal opinion. What do you guys think?
I think it would be very challenging in the district that is majority African American in a two-person race to win it without winning the black vote. That would just seem to be very, very difficult to me. I mean, it can happen. I think we saw white voters in Missouri's African American congressional district in St. Louis did make an impact in that race, but there's also, I think, more white voters in the St. Louis area at this point than there are white voters in the New Orleans district here.
And to add to what you said, Eric, the progressive whites alone don't make up necessarily the bulk of the white vote. We have to remember that there are a lot of white voters in the river counties, even in the suburbs of something like New Orleans, that are willing to come out and vote for Carter if they come out to vote. So that plus about half the black vote is really going to make it hard for Carter Peterson to win. Next question here. Let's see what we found. Yeah, just briefly addressing this. No Republicans. That's true. This is a Democrat on Democrat runoff at the moment because the two Democratic candidates finished first in the first round in New Orleans and the state of Louisiana, along with most of the South. At least Louisiana always, but sometimes the South during special elections, they use a blanket primary. So the top two finishers, regardless of their party, move on to the general election. So, Joe, do we have any results updates?
Not currently, no, Harrison. We do have one parish reporting election, one precinct of Election Day. Ascension is the only one reporting any Election Day voting right now. And in fact, that precinct is basically that parish is basically tied right now. Carter leads by one vote, 422 to 421, with 843 votes in the Ascension parish right now. And that's going to be anotter term you're going to hear used a lot. Louisiana technically does not have counties. They have parishes, which is the same thing. They just like to word it differently down there, Bayou State. But no different resorts right now compared to what we saw about 10 minutes ago. I'm watching both Washington Post and Louisiana Secretary of State site. So once I get something, you'll certainly hear from me.
We have a brief question from Ryan here, just to answer it. As Joe mentioned, Troy Carter is currently leading. He has 56.6% of the vote. But again, early numbers so far, not much of the Election Day vote. I think another thing interesting to look at here is when we looked at mail-in votes, more than half of the votes cast in the primary last time were mail-in votes. Not only an electorate that was overwhelmingly older and overwhelmingly more African-American, but it was also a record, according to John Cuvion last time, for the number of votes being cast mail-in. So I'm curious to see whether that held up this time and how it works, how overall turnout looks. Eric, do you want to take this one? It's brief, but just so readers know.
Sure, although I don't really know the answer to this. I believe Julia Letlow was seated very quickly after being elected. I would imagine the same is the case for whoever is the winner of this race. Expediency tends to be a factor, especially when a district hasn't had representation in months. I mean, keep in mind, a single month of not having a representative in a 2-year term is a very large portion of that. So I don't think there's going to be any delay in getting them seated.
Mm-hmm. We have a question here from John. Is this whole primary, regardless of the final result, a strong showing for progressives in general? I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say that in the first round, it was a very strong showing for somebody like Gary Chambers. And if you had combined the Carter Peterson votes with the Chambers votes, that is pretty impressive for the progressives. But I would ultimately only consider tonight's runoff a success for progressives if Carter Peterson managed to win or if Carter Peterson managed to keep it a very close race. And Joe, you have something?
We just got early vote in from West Baton Rouge Parish. According to the Louisiana Secretary of State website, Troy Carter won that in a 56-44. So I don't know if that's probably not that's probably close to a benchmark that he wanted. I wouldn't know for sure, but that's what we're at right now, and that's in West Baton Rouge. The early vote in 56-44 in the early vote for Troy Carter
In West Baton Rouge?
in West Baton Rouge.
Yeah, that's a county that Troy Carter didn't even finish in the top 3 in last time. The top 3 were Karen Carter Peterson with 23, Klassen Bernard with 23, and Gary Chambers with 21. So if he were to win this, I mean, it's a small portion of the district, but that would not be a great sign for Karen Carter Peterson if she's losing strength in the Baton Rouge portion of the seat.
That is true. It certainly would not be, considering that East Baton Rouge and West Baton Rouge were the only parish portions that were won by Carter Peterson. And like John Couvion said, from those early votes, looked like she missed her mark. But Eric, you wanted to mention something about one-party runoffs?
Yeah. I did want to mention, people talk about one-party runoffs. The general consensus with some political people is that they tend to support the moderate candidate. That's not necessarily the case. California has actually seen the opposite in these one-party runoffs. You had, for example, the 2018 Senate election there, where Republicans, purely out of spite, voted en masse for Kevin DeLeon, the progressive candidate in that race, in a one-on-one race with Dianne Feinstein. It's not always a dynamic that you see. Sometimes they will do it out of spite. Sometimes they will be more, specifically, they'll be more pragmatic about things. So that's sometimes a tendency we see, and we're seeing it more here, or we think we are. But it's not always the case with these sorts of runoffs.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting if we want to take a look here at, as RRH mentioned, 7 out of 10 parishes are now reporting absentee vote totals, and that's basically what we're seeing. I think it's 7 or 8. I have to double check again, but about 8,000 votes have been cast overall, and Carter's at about 57%. I know Joe will let us know when he sees any new things pop up here. So I guess we'll just look at questions here. And Eric, would you like to answer another question? We have one here from It's Aiden.
Yeah, so the reason that Louisiana has such a weird system, this was instituted in 1975 by former Governor Edwin Edwards, one of the more important governors in the history of the state of Louisiana. Basically, he did it as a way to avoid stiff challenges in Democratic primaries. Back in the day in the South, the challenges basically were the real race was the Democratic versus the Democratic race, and races were decided in the primaries. Louisiana had periods, I believe, in the 1980s where there were 0 Republicans in the legislature, like literally none. So this is sort of a way to get around that, let him win re-election without the traditional party primary system. So really, it's
from Joe here. You can finish after, I promise.
Yep.
We do have official, according to Washington Post, it looks like the absentee early vote from Jefferson Parish is in. I would say to my priors, this is a good result for Troy Carter. He is getting 65.6% of the vote in Jefferson Parish so far. Karen Carter Peterson only getting 34.4%. This is according to the Washington Post. So I would guess that's a good result for Carter. That's probably where he needs to be right now. Again, that is just the early day vote, but Jefferson Parish looks like we've got some of that vote in.
And we're going to have to see how Jefferson goes. But again, one of the hallmarks that would be necessary for a Carter Peterson victory in this runoff is a poor performance in Jefferson for Carter. And keep in mind, Jefferson Parish is pretty much the home of Carter. That's where you have those West Bank Democrats that are backing him pretty heavily there. So, again, we're going to have to see how this performance goes. And I believe someone commented here as well. For a 50-50 race, according to John Couvion, who I talked to earlier today, in fact, Carter would need 58 and is currently getting 57. So, again, a lot of the things I mentioned tonight have been from him. And overall, we agreed that Carter is probably a favorite going into this race. But we're going to have to see how the remainder of the night goes. We might just be brought along for a ride in terms of who wins and just have to follow along. But if Karen Carter Peterson wins, I guess we can double address this question. That would certainly be a surprise. I mean, how surprised would you guys be if Carter Peterson actually managed to win?
I need to see more to know.
Yeah, I can chime in here. Like, I don't think I'd be that surprised. We're talking about what is essentially a low turnout runoff, intra-party runoff. I'll also note that progressives have increasingly targeted these districts, these kind of heavily non-white, very Democratic districts. These are districts where progressives oftentimes had trouble. You saw progressives do great in primaries in whiter, more, upscale districts that were heavily Democratic, but they struggled a lot of times in these types of districts, and they've increasingly targeted these. So I wouldn't be shocked if she won. Gary Chambers did get 22%. So, the Chambers plus the Carter Peterson vote, does equal 40. I was shocked. I think it would be a mild upset, but I wouldn't be like stunned or anything.
I'd say the most surprising thing about it would probably just be, in general, the fact that the voters, there are quite a few people who have been turned off by the way that Carter Peterson has campaigned. Some people have criticized her as too progressive, like Eric mentioned, just spurning bipartisanship for progressive causes. But if she wins, I guess it'll show that not only did Gary Chambers perform very well in the first round, which was a good sign for progressives, but that she managed to win. And ultimately, I would just conclude that was a very good cycle for progressives.
I think that's what I'd have to agree with there too. Like I mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned this in an article before, progressives, they've had success in places mainly in New York City. That's where, you've seen these type of progressive Democrats. You've seen Ayanna Pressley, you've seen Cori Bush, but otherwise, it's really been concentrated in the Northeast up there. This would really be their first victory here in the South, where progressives would get it legitimately one of their own into the House of Representatives. This would really be the first case of this happening down in the South. Down in a state like Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina. Down here, it's a lot of still the establishment who still holds these seats, and Carter Peterson winning would really be the first shine of that. Once those moderates leave, there's going to be a shift in how the South sends their representatives if she were to win tonight.
Mm-hmm. And Eric, I know you wanted to finish your thing about the election law, so you can definitely get back to that, and I'll pull up the question again. So go ahead.
Yeah, so this is just really quick. Again, the reason this was instituted, for those who missed it earlier or have just tuned in, literally Governor Edwin Edwards wanted it. Ironically, this actually cost him, the Democratic Party, really an election opportunity in 1979 of all elections, where a Republican, Dave Treen, was elected. In the primary, he got 22% of the vote, and 8 other Democrats combined for the rest of the vote. But Treen won the runoff. So that's, again, a weird example of that. But previously, Louisiana for a while tried to have this thing where you could just avoid the runoff entirely if you got 50% of the vote. They had their primary in October before the federal election. And they just said if you got 50% of the vote in the October election, you're elected. The Supreme Court told them that is illegal because all federal elections have to be held on federal election day. And so as a result, Louisiana just brought the primary vote to the November election day and then had runoffs a month later, which is, again, ridiculous. It's resulting in multiple elections, and the same thing follows for special elections. You have the election. If nobody gets 50% or more, the runoff is a month later. So that's, again, a space of time, a month, where there's no representative in this district.
Joe, did you have something to add? I didn't see if you put your finger up or not. I wasn't sure.
No new updates right now currently. Obviously, the only parish that we're still waiting on early voting for is Orleans. That's really the only one that we're waiting here for early voting. It's the only one that hasn't reported any yet. Once we have that, then we're going to move on to the election day reporting. Once we really get to there, that's when we really start to have some fun, and that's where we're really going to start to see the bare bones of those results. So I will tell you once we get to the Orleans early voting, early and absentee vote, and then we will certainly, I think, start to see election day vote really start to come in here.
Thank you,
Orleans is kind of a big one, a big one that we're to wait for.
And this plays into the question I wanted to answer here: is COVID-19 causing low turnout? So I definitely respect the question, but I would honestly argue that it isn't. I would say just in general, for years, we've had special elections, especially off-year special elections, and especially runoffs of special elections, where turnout is just always going to be low. In fact, I would argue that turnout was benefited by the fact that 52% of the voters in the first round mailed in their ballots, and mail-in voting was seen to have increased turnout on both sides in the 2020 general election, despite being in a pandemic that arguably was worse last November than it is now. turnout was still very good, record-breaking in 2020. And the turnout is not good here, but again, it's a special election and it's off of a cycle. There's nothing at the top of the ticket drawing voters out to vote. But no, I would say that COVID-19 is not the number one impact in terms of causing low turnout here, because we've still got a good half of the voters, many of whom are older voters that didn't mail in their ballots, coming in to vote. And I think this plays into here as well. We're still waiting on Election Day vote, and that very well could be a bad sign for Carter, because I trust Kuvion completely with this stuff. But we're just waiting, like Joe said, on the Election Day votes to come in, because that's roughly about half of the remaining votes. And if Carter Peterson can really just make or break Carter Peterson, basically, will she improve or not? Go ahead, Joe.
We are starting to see some Election Day reporting, mostly from Ascension Parish right now. And the Election Day vote there has allowed Karen Carter Peterson to take the lead in Ascension County. She now leads in Ascension Parish 51% to 49% by about 21 votes. That's where most of the Election Day vote has come in from so far. Again, I'm getting all of this right now from the Louisiana Secretary of State website. If folks would like to follow along with us at home, we've also gotten 2 Election Day precincts in from St. John the Baptist Parish. Troy Carter still leads there 66 to 34, where if you look at the early vote here, that's basically where we were at the early vote, so no change there in St. John's the Baptist Parish.
Mm-hmm. And let me briefly just share a map with viewers, just so the viewers can follow along fully with Joe, just in case you don't have the results on at home. But I'll use this right now because RRH is directly tied right now with the Louisiana Board of Elections. So as Joe mentioned, you can see right now that Carter Peterson is leading in 2 parish portions, East Baton Rouge Parish and Ascension Parish, albeit narrowly in Ascension Parish. But I think what we're watching tonight, we're watching definitely mainly East Baton Rouge, because you have a lot more voters there than you would in West Baton Rouge. But both the parts of Baton Rouge. We're watching Jefferson Parish, because it should be Carter's strongest parish on paper. We're watching Orleans Parish, because we'll have to see how the black wards vote versus the uptown white, more progressive wards that are pretty much expected to back Carter Peterson handily. And then third, after all of that, or fourth, I guess, we'll be looking at the river counties, the river parishes, as they're known in Louisiana. And the river parishes hold the secret, because ultimately, if the election is very close, it might be Carter's better performance out here in some of these river parishes that could put him over the line if we're in a very close runoff. We'll have to see. Go ahead, Joe.
We've got more Election Day vote coming in here now, Harrison. West Baton Rouge has reported 7 Election Day precincts, and that has knocked down Troy Carter's early day and absentee voting number significantly here in West Baton Rouge. He was up 56 to 44 in the early vote and absentee. Karen Carter Peterson has now shrunk that margin to 53 to 47. So she's gotten an extra 3% in so far from Election Day, with only about half the precincts in on Election Day. Could be a sign of things to come here in that West Baton Rouge precinct. Election Day vote right now certainly seeming to favor Carter Peterson, and we can see it again as well in East Baton Rouge, which has reported 5 of its 82 Election Day precincts. Karen Carter Peterson now leads 54 to 46 in East Baton Rouge, a 2% jump for her. So this is why we think it could be very close tonight, folks. This is why we think it could be very, very close tonight, is that we do expect Election Day vote to favor Carter Peterson, especially in these East Baton Rouge area parishes. It could be a lot of fun tonight, folks. For a DVD race, we could be in for a lot of fun. There is no clear favor right now. And from what I'm seeing right now, expect this to be within 5% in the final margin right now. I'd say expect this to be a very close runoff.
Yep. And before I address some more questions here, throw them to the panel, I'm going to go to Kraz first, because I believe you wanted to mention something. So go ahead, Kraz.
So I was just going to mention, if the Election Day vote is good for Carter Peterson, that would be different than my expectations. I honestly expected her to do best in absentees. I think that if she's doing well in election day vote, that's a really good sign. Just because if she's hitting her benchmarks or exceeding her benchmarks, it's a good sign for her. Just because we expect probably a lower percentage of the vote to be cast by mail this time than in November and in, I believe, when was the primary? January. Just because, like you said, the COVID-19 pandemic, while obviously still at the forefront of everyone's mind, is arguably a little less pressing than it was at the time, given the state of vaccinations and just the state of the virus. So if she's doing well on election day vote, I mean, I expect that to be a really high percentage of the vote. And so if she can hit her benchmarks there, she's doing well. And we could see would be probably a mild upset.
Mm-hmm. And I'm about to pull up something to show you guys that will answer another question about what does Carter need in Orleans Parish. But in the meantime, I'd like to throw it to Eric because he was just talking about how the runoff system kind of arose. So here you go, Eric. Do you think that the runoff system should be abolished in Louisiana? Why or why not? So I guess this is a good question to throw to you.
Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think runoffs are the problem. I think the problem is the jungle primary. I hate open blanket primaries. I think party primaries should be, personally, this is my personal opinion, I think party primaries should be, all parties should have their own primary. And ideally for me, I think that party registered members should be the only ones allowed to vote in them because they're the ones with skin in the game. But I do think if you're having an open jungle primary, the runoff is necessary. You can't have people winning with 20% of the vote. That's just ridiculous. In North Carolina, we require if you don't get 30% of your vote in your primary, it goes to a runoff. That's, I think, a reasonable threshold, maybe 35, 40%. I don't know.
You can go ahead, Joe.
All right, so we do have some more Election Day precincts coming in here. We've got some from St. Charles, and this is the first time I've seen this so far tonight. Troy Carter won the early vote there 65-35, but with some of the Election Day vote in here in the St. Charles Parish, he has gone up to a 66-34. 4 of those Election Day precincts are now in. He is up 66-34 now in Karen Carter Peterson. That's the first time I've seen tonight where Carter has gotten a larger lead from Election Day reporting. It's a very small increase, but it is still an increase nonetheless. Something to watch there in that St. Charles Parish for sure.
Thank you, Joe. Real quick, I'm going to answer. I plugged the article I wrote a while ago reviewing the primary, and it talks about the impact of a GOP voter plus Carter coalition against Carter Peterson, and it talks about the racial breakdown of the city of New Orleans within Orleans Parish and how that's going to play into the vote. So I actually have something I'll share my screen, but let me first put up the question here. What does Carter need in Orleans? So let me share my screen. So this is the racial breakdown by war, or it's not, well, the second part is not by war, but this is the census tract breakdown by race. So blue is majority black, and then majority white is in green. So you can see this is called Uptown because it's north of the river, the majority white. This whole band that runs up along the river and then up around over the central black precincts is predominantly white, more progressive. This is where you saw Gary Chambers and Carter Peterson really feuding. And this is going to be the biggest bane on Carter right now because Carter is going to do very well in the 15th Ward down here and in the other areas in Jefferson Parish. And Carter, again, will probably do well in the central wards 2, 3, and the bottom half of 4 and 5 as well, as you can see here. This is pretty much probably going to line up with what we saw in the first part. So we're going to see that most likely in the central part. And then in the white wards in the Uptown, we'll probably see the Chambers voters coming out to vote for Carter Peterson, so a consolidation of that progressive vote. But according to John Cuvion, the wards that we're really going to be looking at tonight are the black wards of 7, 8, and 9, unlike 15. And he mentioned these in particular because he pointed out that the black vote is going to be very important here. And if the black vote's somewhat split, then the winner of this whole thing as a result is most likely to be winning the black vote, and therefore will probably be winning wards 7, 8, 9. So I would say that 15, 2, 3, 6, 5, and 4 are decidedly for Carter. 1, 10, 11, 12, 13, 16, and 17 are going to be the progressive wards that pretty much are going to back Peterson tonight. But 7, 8, and 9, those are the wards to be watching. And when we go over here to RRH, we can't see wards, but we can see precincts, and we can see the precincts that will be within the wards. So tonight, we'll definitely be watching these precincts up here in Wards 7, 8, and 9 that will ultimately decide the fate of Orleans Parish and could very well decide who wins this runoff tonight. So with that, I'll throw it back right now to the rest of the panel. What do you guys think about Orleans Parish tonight? Eric, any thoughts?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. This is a really, really important part of the district. Obviously, I mean, the city of New Orleans is the major area of this district. We saw some interesting trends in the last election, or the previous. I guess I don't know the term general election, primary, runoff, whatever you term it. There were some interesting things that went on there. Yeah.
Joe, I meant to ask you as well earlier on, not about updates, but about these election day votes we're getting out of West Baton Rouge. If you compare that to the performance the first time when obviously Carter was not even in the top 3, like Eric said, how do you think that affects the likelihood of Carter winning this runoff tonight based off of his performance in East and West Baton Rouge?
Well, I'd say it explains what we thought could happen early on. If Republicans are turning out, it means they are voting for Troy Carter. Right now, again, still no recent updates here, but with about, again, 7 of the 13 election day precincts in there. And we just got a big update from someone because we do have the early voting numbers from Orleans Parish, and Troy Carter won the early and absentee vote in Orleans Parish 58% to 42%.
Wow.
Again, let me confirm. It is a 58 to 42% victory in the early voting for Troy Carter in the Orleans precinct. And that does mean that is a huge jump in votes now. We're up to 30,000 total votes. It is a 17,920 vote lead for Troy. 17,920 votes for Troy Carter right now. 12,663 votes right now for Karen Carter Peterson. That is certainly a decent result there of the Orleans Parish, but it'll be interesting to see if it is like the most of the parishes that we've seen tonight, if Karen Carter Peterson can claw some of that back from Election Day vote.
And that's really big. John Coulion was predicting that it would only go 51 to 49 for Carter. So going 58% to Carter in this early vote is a very major overperformance for him. And this is, I believe, the largest. Good. Yeah, this is the largest parish in the district, so that's fairly important.
And like I mentioned, that's a good sign if we want to foresee how he's going to do in Ward 7, 8, and 9, the toss-up wards. And that could also mean right now that Karen Carter Peterson's underperforming expectations in those uptown, whiter wards that she'd need to be doing well in. That's the only way I could think of, unless, barring any major changes in the actual Election Day vote, if it holds roughly the same margin for Carter, that's very good overall and could certainly back up what we've been arguing for about a 5-6 point Carter win, maybe even more, depending on whether or not it gets lopsided. But again, guys, still early, quite a few votes left to count. Only 73 precincts reporting, like Joe mentioned. So we're going to be waiting. Ooh, here's a good question. What does Peterson need in the rest of East Baton Rouge? Well, last time around, Troy Carter only got 26% in East Baton Rouge. So if you combine the Chambers and the Peterson votes, again, combining Peterson and Chambers, you get roughly 66% of the vote going to the combined progressive candidates in the first round. If you look at the results currently in East Baton Rouge, which is far more populated than West Baton Rouge, Karen Carter Peterson is only winning 54-46. So I would say that you really would need to have Karen Carter Peterson doing pretty well in East Baton Rouge. I'm not sure if 54% is enough there, because that would show that quite a few Chambers voters just aren't coming out to vote in East Baton Rouge. Kraz, do you have any thoughts? Actually, Joe, I think you have an update first, then we'll go to Kraz.
Yeah, just a quick update here, Harrison. We're looking at St. John the Baptist parish here, which nearly we're going to update you on 2 parishes. First, here in St. John the Baptist, it has nearly all of its election day precincts coming in. 20 of its 28 now, and Troy Carter leads there 65 to 35%. That is a slight decrease from the early vote, which he won 66 to 35, or 66 to 34 over Karen Carter Peterson. So a slight increase in numbers here. Of course, still 8 precincts to go, so that could change. But also in the Ascension Parish, which might end up being the closest parish of the night, 15 to 21 precincts in there. Karen Carter Peterson literally has a 5-vote lead there in the Ascension Parish. So that, that's interesting to watch there. Otherwise, of course, we're still waiting for, this is the big one here, folks. We're still waiting for more Election Day reporting from East Baton Rouge. If we're not going to get that, then once we going to get that, then that's when we're really, I think, going to start to see things really kind of start to shine here, folks, is once we kind of get more out of that East Baton Rouge parish. That's where we're really going to start to see where things are going at this point tonight.
And Kraz, I'll throw it back to you to make your point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think these Orleans numbers are very good for Troy Carter. You have to think that it looks like Joe has something if he wants to chime back in.
Sorry, I have to insert myself here because West Baton Rouge is done, and Karen Carter Peterson has overtaken Troy Carter there now on the night. It is not a big lead for her, but with all the Election Day reporting in, remember, this is one that Karen Carter Peterson lost the early vote in. She lost the early vote in West Baton Rouge Parish, 56 to 44. But with all the Election Day vote in, she has ended up winning that 51 to 49% in West Baton Rouge precincts. That means she has won that. And we've had a huge drop. 27 precincts dropped in East Baton Rouge Parish. Karen Carter Peterson now leads there, 61% to 39% in East Baton Rouge. That's a big get for her, and that's those margins in both East and West Baton Rouge have dropped Troy Carter's overall margin now down to 57 to 43% on the night. Like I said, I think we are going to start to see a tightening of results here tonight as we get this Election Day vote in. Not necessarily what we expected, but it's clearly what's something happening here. Also want to mention Iberville Parish now has 13 of its 24 parishes in. Troy Carter won the early vote there, 54 to 46. With Election Day vote starting to come in there, it is now 53 to 47 there for Troy Carter. So again, we're seeing this in most of the precincts, right, in most of the parishes right now. This tightening of the numbers here, I think we might be. We're going to have to see what's going on in Orleans before we really say anything. But we're going to continue to see tightening as more of these numbers come in tonight, folks.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And it's worth noting the two progressive candidates got 2/3 of the vote in East Baton Rouge in the primary of this race. So that's in line with what that was then.
Yep. And Kraz, please go ahead and make your point. I know you've been trying to get there, but we've had developments. You are free now.
Yeah.
I'll mute
I was
anybody.
going to say, look, right, the Orleans results are good for Troy Carter. You think that if he's, pulling in, those kinds of numbers with absentee and early vote, he's in a strong position in the district's most populous parish. That being said, though, obviously Karen Carter Peterson has been storming back with Election Day vote. So, we got to be careful drawing too many conclusions. If she is really doing very well on Election Day vote, if that pattern holds in Orleans, she could pull it off. So, I think Troy Carter's getting what he needs in early and absentee. But, again, we learned this, lesson sometimes the hard way in November, which is wait for the Election Day vote. Sometimes it's unpredictable. You just got to wait for it all to be in.
Okay, Eric. Thank you, Kraz. We're going to go over to Eric now, who's going to answer Grant Clark's question. Grant Clark's put a few questions forward. So while we wait, Eric, feel free to answer as many as you want. After that, I'm going to provide a brief update on the Orleans toss-up ward 7, 8, and 9, and I'm also going to address the question on what does Karen Carter Peterson need to win.
Mm-hmm. So what I was going to answer real quick is the question is, will Democrats get another congressional district in 2022? Personally, I don't see that as likely. The problem is that right now in the Louisiana legislature, while Democrats do not have they can theoretically overcome a veto. The balance of power is held by independents, and there's also a fairly large number of districts that are represented by Democrats that are very, very substantially Trump. If those Democrats and independent voters go to bat for a second VRA congressional district in Louisiana, one that would be probably pretty ugly and would screw one Republican out of it, you'd probably see a very concerted effort to get rid of them in the next election. I think it may be more likely that we get something like this, which I'll show on my screen, which is just a cleaner version of the current map. All the incumbents are the same. The second now does not take any of Baton Rouge, and the sixth is now has all of that and is able to be a little bit more competitive. But it's still Trump plus 17 from 2016 numbers. I think this would be far more likely than a Democratic second district, which again would screw one Republican out, and that Republican would probably be maybe Steve Scalise, which is definitely a no-go. There is no way Republicans allow that to happen, I don't think. It's possible Democrats can push for a competitive seat, but on the whole, it's a very, very difficult thing for them to do.
Thank you, Eric. And real quick, I'll address the question here from AP. What does Karen Carter Peterson need to win? But first, I want to share something with the precincts because we talked a lot about the importance of the toss-up wards, as I call them over here, in 7, 8, and 9. I believe this is Ward 9. Yes, Ward 9 over here. But you can see Carter doing very well on the precinct level up here in most of these majority black precincts. And it could bode well, at least in this part of the district, I don't know about East Baton Rouge, for Carter winning the overall black vote, which would be very, very important given this district is a majority-minority seat with a high black population. But to go back again, what would she need? So I'm going to go to the Washington Post because it's a more intuitive map than the Secretary of State's page. But just before we go back to Joe for updates, this is what she would need. So again, West Baton Rouge, not that many votes. She did win. That's good news because she won it last time. East Baton Rouge, again, about 8,000 people voted there last time. It makes up about 15% of the district's population. And she's at about 61%, which is just a few points under the combined Peterson Chambers vote from the first round of voting. So what I would expect here is that while this is a slight underperformance, it's not bad. It's definitely an improvement from what we saw earlier. She's gone up by about 5 points. But in my opinion, for Karen Carter Peterson to win, she would need to get about 65% in East Baton Rouge. And then if we go over here, New Orleans, specifically Orleans Parish, would have to be closer. Again, it's early, but for her to win, she needed to do better than she's doing in East Baton Rouge Parish. But more importantly, like John Couvion said, she would definitely need to trim down the margin in Orleans Parish because a 58-42 margin is a lot to overcome. I'd say a 51-49 benchmark is what we expected it to start at, according to John Couvion, as the election day votes start to come in. But again, basically to sum it up, needs to do at or slightly better than she's doing in East Baton Rouge. Needs to do better in Orleans Parish. And again, part of the reason why Orleans Parish might be lopsided right now is because most of our votes, as you can see here, our election day votes at least, have come from areas where Carter is strong, majority black wards. But finally, just to wrap up before I go back, Jefferson is another thing. So Troy Carter was initially underperforming in Jefferson, but now he's up to 67%, which again is in line with a strong performance in his home parish. So those are the three things that I'd say Peterson would need to win. But right now it looks like Carter is definitely the favorite. We're going to have to keep watching, and I'm going to go right back to Joe here for an update. Joe, feel free to go ahead if you have any new things.
Yeah, not much. Again, like I said, we do have seen some updates. We do have two parishes now who are very, very close to all in. Ascension, which I've mentioned, has been a very close parish all night. Karen Carter Peterson has a 51 to 49% lead there over Troy Carter with 18 of 21 election day precincts in. So we're getting very, very close to the end there in Ascension Parish. While in St. John the Baptist Parish, this is a very different story. Troy Carter leads there 65 to 35%, which is not a huge drop off from the early vote numbers there, which were 66 to 34% in favor of Carter. Well, Ascension is a little bit different. If you look at Ascension, the early vote was basically even. Carter only won that by 1 vote. Now Karen Carter Peterson leads by about 30. Again, that's not a huge number of votes, but it's kind of is showing the pattern that we've seen tonight. Carter Peterson doing marginally better in election day vote, but questionably whether or not that is going to be enough to knock off Carter's bigger leads, I think, than we thought he'd have in the early and absentee vote, especially, I think, in Orleans Parish. That's where I think she might be in the most danger.
Okay, we're going to move on now to Eric, who's going to shout out our Patreon.
Someone muted me. Sorry. Yeah, thank you guys so much for supporting us and continuing. We're going to be quick with this. We do have a Patreon if you'd like to support us and help us continue what we're doing. We just started it a few weeks ago, and we're starting to roll out our first benefits. We're going to start doing that this week. Whether or not you want to do it, that's fine. We have it there as an option to support us, but we're really blown away by the amount of support you give us for these live coverage election things. We love doing them. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, we're going to get right back into the election here because we got some pretty substantial numbers here. You can also donate. If you want to do a one-time donation, you can do that on our website as well.
And Eric mentioned we do have some earlier results in right now. It's still a 57 to 43% lead right now for Troy Carter, but Karen Carter Peterson has taken the lead in Iberville Parish now. She now leads that parish 51 to 49. And if you'll let me share my screen here, Harrison.
Go do the request and I'll put it on.
We've got it's not letting me do it. So Harrison, if you would mind sharing your screen on the Washington Post web results right now, if you could bring that up sometime shortly, because I think there is starting to be a pattern here that I think is pretty clear. As you go to the western part of this district, not all of these wins are big wins, but Karen Carter Peterson clearly showing a lead here in the western part of the parish, and in the Baton Rouge area, now in Iberville and Ascension Parish, she has leads in. But then once you get down to Assumption, St. James, St. John the Baptist, St. Charles, Jefferson, and then Orleans, you start to see that all being for Carter and all giving him, at the very least, other than Orleans, 60% of the vote right now. So that's really what's giving Carter this big 57 to 43 lead right now, is that he is getting those huge margins. And as Eric mentioned, these river counties, and especially Jefferson Parish, that's the big one right now, of those river counties that really hit what needs to be done for him right now. That's what's giving him this lead. What's really going to be important, though, is, again, where's Carter Peterson going to stand here in East Baton Rouge, and can she knock down Troy Carter's lead in Orleans? That's what's really going to drive it right here, right now. That's where we're going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I spoke earlier about Karen Carter Peterson needing to just do a couple points better. Just even a couple points will help in East Baton Rouge. And she was at 60 at that point. Now she's at 63%. So it's half the vote in, and she's gone up. That's exactly what she needs. But at the same time, Troy Carter is getting closer to the initial 70-30 expectation that we had in Jefferson Parish. She's at 68% right now. And again, like we've seen in the comments, like Joe just said, it's going to come down to Orleans Parish. Not only because Orleans Parish makes up the majority of the votes in the district, which it does, because most of the electorate lives there, but also because it's going to decide pretty much who wins this runoff. I mean, at the moment, Karen Carter Peterson is underperforming in the most important part of the district. And that's the one place that ultimately she can't afford to underperform in. So like Joe said, if she tightens it up, the race tightens up. If not, then Troy Carter probably gets projected winner in half an hour or an hour. Go ahead, Kraz.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that it seems like to me, and one of the comments obviously mentioned this, that Carter Peterson seems to be doing what she needs to do in every rural parish, most suburban and exurban parishes, but then not really getting what she needs at Orleans and only kind of matching what she needs East Baton Rouge. I think one of the things we could be seeing here is in those rural parishes, in those suburban parishes, and those exurban parishes, the Republican base tends to be more white working class, more rural voters that might not be as high turnout, especially in an off year special election in a Dem versus Dem race. But if you think about the kind of conservative leaning voters in places like Orleans Parish or even East Baton Rouge Parish, there's disproportionately likely to be more wealthy suburbanites and more kinds of voters who are going to be coming out no matter what. So I wonder if we're seeing an effect where Republican voters are making a difference, but only in some counties. Wealthy white Republicans are coming out in uptown New Orleans, but they're not coming out in St. John the Baptist. So I'm not sure. We'll look at the precinct data later, but that's a possibility.
And even in uptown New Orleans, you have a lot of progressive Democrats who are more likely to vote, per se, in that specific region than other white voters. But as well, like you said, the other white voters in the district, especially the more Republican river parishes, just like you mentioned, Kraz, are more likely to prefer someone like Troy Carter if they voted all in a Democrat-on-Democrat runoff than their progressive counterparts in uptown New Orleans. And I will be right back. I'm going to have to double check on the precinct results, but I will try and answer Brian Election's question about Orleans. I know we have Carter votes reporting in from wards 7, 8, and 9. But again, the part of Orleans where Carter Peterson is expected to do very well, i.e. the place where the Carter Peterson Chambers votes are the strongest when combined, not reporting yet as far as I know, but I'll double check. And this is also true as well, though if Chambers' votes had been combined with hers, she would have won the district. I'll just note that. So we can expect her to win the district tonight. Do you have any thoughts on all of Ascension Parish reporting in, Joe?
No, not particularly. Again, Ascension this has been one that has been close since the night started. Karen Carter Peterson ended up winning this year, 52% to 48%. It was tied basically 50-50 when the early vote came in. So that's a 2% increase. If that's matched, we'll see if that matters in the end. If that's continued to be matched across the rest of the state, but that's not necessarily true, though. I mean, if you look at the early vote in East Baton Rouge, it was only 52 to 48 in favor of Karen Carter Peterson. On election day voting, it's 63 to 37 right there now. So we're really starting to get into the nitty gritty here, and I think while I'm watching here, we got a big drop. I think from Orleans Parish potentially here. If I can take a quick look, see here, I think we might have gotten a little drop here from Orleans Parish.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly
We're up to 66 precincts now, and now Carter's lead has dropped. He's taken a 2% hit now. He now only leads 56 to 44 in Orleans Parish. So that is a hit there for Carter. 66 of the election day precincts are now in for Orleans Parish.
And a lot of that also, what we're seeing now, we've seen Orleans Parish tighten up a little bit. It's now only a 10-point race, and that's largely because of what I'm about to show you. The uptown white precincts, more progressive, are coming in now for Karen Carter Peterson. So you can see here the uptown band of white wards that wraps around. It goes up and around following the river and then swings up north to here. You can see that's where Peterson is winning most of these precincts, some of them by pretty strong margins. But if we want to move up here to wards 7, 8, and 9, and someone just mentioned this in the comments as well, but Karen Carter Peterson in these toss-up ward areas like Ward 9, is underperforming. She needed to hit about 43% of the vote and is hitting about 41% of the vote on average. Carter overall, though, doing well, winning the majority of these precincts in the 9th ward and presumably also in wards 7 and 8, which are also toss-up wards, which probably means Carter will come out on top, winning the black vote in the district. So again, I think that's pretty significant. And overall, we're certainly seeing, minus the progressive whites in New Orleans, that pretty stark east-west divide between the Carter supporters and the supporters of Karen Carter Peterson, most of whom are in East Baton Rouge, West Baton Rouge, and to some extent Ascension and Iberville parishes as well. Eric, any current thoughts?
No, I mean, if I were right now one of the two candidates, I think I'd rather be Carter than Carter Peterson at this point. Peterson is absolutely doing better in the river parishes than expected. She's doing very well there, but Orleans is doing not as well as you would want for her, and she's actually not doing as well as in East Baton Rouge as people like John Coulian thought she could do. See, I think this all goes down to how Orleans goes at this point. Karen Carter Peterson really needs to pick up here, or this thing could not spiral out of control, but it would certainly not go in the direction she wants it to go.
All right, go ahead, Joe.
We've got another completed parish here, folks. St. Charles Parish, according to the Louisiana Secretary of State website, has reported all of its precincts. Troy Carter ends up winning St. Charles Parish 70% to 30%. Carter took 2,346 votes there. Karen Carter Peterson only took 989 votes there. And we did just have a pretty big recent drop of precincts in Jefferson Parish for Election Day voting. 63 of the 113 precincts there. Carter leads there 67% to 33%. When you compare that to the early voting in Jefferson Precinct, it's actually a 1% increase right now in Jefferson Parish for Troy Carter. He won the early voting and absentee voting there 66 to 34%. He leads there 67% to 33%, with about a little over half of the election day vote in, according again to the Louisiana Secretary of State website.
And I also want to note, when we're discussing turnout here, overall across the board, turnout is lower in every parish today from the last election, from the first round, which is expected. So the turnout is low in Jefferson right now. It's lower in St. Charles. It's lower in East Baton Rouge. It's lower across the board. So I think it's more important to look at the margin comparison rather than the turnout. And we have a couple interesting points here. You've seen the 4-point swing in Ascension. And also here when we look at Jefferson Parish. Yes, go ahead, Joe.
We've got a bit of a drop. We had a recent drop in 13 precincts, dropped in East Baton Rouge. Karen Carter Peterson now has 64% of the vote in East Baton Rouge.
And Joe, just for you to explain, I'm going to share the Washington Post map so you can explain to the viewers everything that's going on.
Thank you very much. So now 54 of the 82 election day precincts are now in East Baton Rouge. Carter Peterson, she's slowly, she's starting to raise that number. Again, she only, in the early vote, we thought this could be potentially a very bad sign of her. She only won at 52 to 48 in the early vote, but now she's up to 64% of the vote with election day and still 28 precincts left to come in there. She leads 64 to 36%. So that's not all bad news. She's cut the lead down for Carter all around to about 7,500 votes. Again, we're starting to see here as more of these Carter precincts come in places like, again, Jefferson is all, St. Charles is all in, St. James is almost all in, St. John the Baptist is almost all in. Once we see those parishes kind of even out here, and if we're not done yet in places like East Baton Rouge, when we're done with counting, we might be able to expect maybe some of the vote that we have left might be Karen Carter Peterson favor, and that's why we might be waiting on making a call here in this state, just because of the way that the election day vote has been going. Right now, it's looking much more favorable to Karen Carter Peterson, and we are really going to have to wait and see on more of this Orleans vote. We're starting to get more of it coming in here, but we're really going to have to wait and see on that before we're really able to make a call.
And about half of the total reporting precincts have reported in the district as a whole. And East Baton Rouge is looking a bit better than it was earlier for Karen Carter Peterson. She's still a bit short of that 66% combined progressive margin from the first round. And ultimately, what she has there right now is not going to be enough, not only because there just aren't enough outstanding votes in the places where she's doing best, but just because there isn't the raw quantity of votes, even in a good turnout or decently good special election turnout like last round, for her to win. Because, like so many people are mentioning in the comments, Orleans is only 21% reporting, and it holds the key to winning this election, because about half the precincts are either going to come from the tail end of Jefferson or from the majority of Orleans. Both of those parishes right now, especially Jefferson, the home parish of Carter, he has a big margin there, are being won by Troy Carter. But I think the thing we're going to be looking at now, the thing that Joe's going to be looking at from now on, is Orleans Parish. Will Carter's lead stay there? And will enough of the black wards, or I guess I should say, will the black wards be enough to put Carter over the top, even with progressive white voters in Uptown? And to be honest, if Orleans Parish stays how it is now, I think the election will be wrapping up shortly, because I don't see a path to victory for Carter Peterson. So I know we'll stay with Joe for any changes in Orleans, but at this point, it doesn't look like the white vote there will be enough to put Karen Carter Peterson in the lead. She would have to win Orleans Parish or come up short by like 0.5% to win.
Yeah. And we're talking about right now is we have 3 parishes fully in right now: Ascension, West Baton Rouge, St. Charles. But the big ones are still out, but at the moment, like, it's just not what you would want to have if you're Karen Carter Peterson. I mean, Orleans Parish is one that theoretically should have been a little bit better. This is one that Gary Chambers and Karen Carter Peterson combined with about 52% of the vote. So it wasn't impossible for them to win, for her to win this. But right now, this just isn't the performance that you would need. It's 56 to 44 for Carter in Orleans Parish right now.
And if I can just jump in here for a quick second, Jefferson Parish too, which is going to have a lot of votes tonight, I think too. Only about half of that is still in. So that is really, that might be one of the only places left here that we might see really Carter supporting votes really coming in here, depending on what's left. That's why Mayor B here he grows. So if he continues to have that 60, 67, 68% in Jefferson, combine that with, not being able to really get anywhere close in New Orleans for Carter Peterson, that's when we as a group here might be able to say, this race is over.
Yeah. And I mean, turnout's probably going to be down everywhere, including Jefferson Parish by a couple thousand votes, but we're at about 10,000 votes cast in Jefferson. We had 19,000 last time. Jefferson, the margin's going to stay strong. I'd be surprised if Carter finished below 65%. So that's just a good another 5,000 votes out there, the majority of which 3,500 or so will go to Carter. And when you have these smaller river parishes like Ascension or Iberville coming in fully, and East Baton Rouge is at 70% in, every vote really does count. Every vote counts.
Mm-hmm. And we're starting to close down on some of these rural river parishes. Right now, Assumption Parish, we should have like a swear jar for whenever we say county instead of parish. But Assumption only has 1 precinct left. Iberville has 4 left. St. John the Baptist has 3. So we're kind of nearing the end on some of these smaller parishes, and just kind of leaving the brunt of them, which is East Baton Rouge, Jefferson, and Orleans parishes. I mean, that's always where the game's been with this whole thing. But just keep an eye on those because they're about to finish up soon.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, we do have a small update here according to Washington Post in Jefferson. Troy Carter continues to kind of hold a growing lead here compared to the early vote. He now has about 67.5% of the vote in Jefferson Parish. He's winning 67.5% of it again. He only won the early vote with about 66% of the vote. So I know someone I just saw someone comment, are we in the I've seen enough category yet? Not yet. Again, I still really want to wait and see here on what could come in from Orleans. I still need to see another big drop there I think for me personally, to really make a call. But, like I've said, I still think this is looking continually good for Carter here as we continue to get more of the vote in.
Yeah. And I'd like to point out as well that this lines up not just with our expectation going into this, which is we roughly predicted a 53-47 win, but it also lines up pretty well with the map that J. Miles Coleman made a while ago. And it was basically all of the remaining Dems, not that map, but that is also important.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have Eric discuss that in a second. But
this is the precinct one, yeah.
Yeah, basically this map showed the combined Carter plus Republican votes yielding 53% for Carter in the last election. So that would maybe not necessarily be the same coalition, but it's in the ballpark of what we expected in overall percentage. And I mean, as you can see here from what Eric is showing, you can pretty clearly see that divide, the East-West divide, if you will, between the Carter Peterson supporters and the Carter supporters. And minus the progressive whites backing Carter Peterson in New Orleans, Carter Peterson supports mostly concentrated in the upper river parishes. As you can see, Ascension, Iberville Parish, and over there in East Baton Rouge and in the small West Baton Rouge portion. And I'd like to point out, can you go scroll in right there by Baton Rouge, Eric?
Oh, right here.
Right where it says Baton Rouge. You see that one stray Carter precinct? That line of Carter precincts? Those are actually white voters. Those are white neighborhoods sandwiched between 2 majority black neighborhoods. So you can see that racial divide. And before in the first round,
Carter's winning 100% of the vote in some of these, literally 100% of the votes.
Those were both Claston Bernard precincts sandwiched in between Democratic precincts beforehand. So that's a perfect example of white Republican voters that are voting in this, the few that are coming out and voting for Carter over Carter Peterson, who's doing resoundingly better in the black areas, east and west, especially in East Baton Rouge, because that portion of the district is well over 90% black.
And again, what we're looking at here, like literally 96% for Carter in these white precincts, 93%, 100% of the vote, literally 100% of the vote for Carter.
Incredibly racially polarized.
And I'm assuming these ones right here, for example, these ones are all white Republican areas. Like, again, this doesn't always happen in runoff
Can you bring
elections.
it back up again?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this doesn't always happen in runoffs, but it's clearly happening here. They're clearly decisively going to Carter.
Go into the Orleans area for a second, because
Yeah,
there are a
let's
few more
let's
things.
go into Orleans Parish.
So, no, zoom a little bit out, just a little bit, so you can get in below and Jefferson as well. But if you see those Jefferson precincts in the south there, a lot of those are white suburbs, but they're not, elite affluent suburbs. They're more working class white type suburbs, but you're still seeing those voters coming out and voting for Carter. Yet additionally, if you zoom in again, if you compare them with any white voters over the river in uptown, that's where you see most of these green precincts, where you're having the combined Chambers and Carter Peterson vote. And to be honest, one of the reasons why Carter Peterson might not be doing as well in Orleans Parish, it might simply be explained if you look at these precincts. I mean, you're seeing here in a lot of these 55%, 57, 60%. If you think, that's not really that much, because if you combine the amounts in these precincts that were won by Carter, Peterson, and Chambers in the first round, they're higher percentages. So it's a mixed bag. But you can also see up there in Ward 9, which is a black ward, one of the toss-up wards, that Carter is doing very, very well there. And we mentioned earlier that Carter Peterson missed the mark there and will likely miss the mark in Wards 7 and 8, and therefore perform poorly in the central black wards like 15, which is the West Bank there that extends down to the marshland, if you want to call it that. And we don't see precincts in there. And also the other black wards that are kind of interwoven between those green white wards and the 7, 8, and 9 northern black wards, like I showed earlier. Racial polarization, that is a big theme of this election, even though the election is between two black Democratic candidates.
Yeah, and I also want to show, the comparison here is with the Baton Rouge areas, where you can see these are very, very resoundingly Carter Peterson. I mean, these are just not even competitive. If you look at these 70, 76,
they literally purposely drew this part of the district to exclude all the majority white neighborhoods. They only had to include that one strip of 3 white precincts to keep it contiguous. That's it.
Yeah. Again, the areas in the southern part, I'll open this map up again one more time. These aren't necessarily strongly Republican areas at this point, but the southern part of Baton Rouge is what is the people that are trying to make it into the city of St. George. Is they're not happy with being lumped in with Baton Rouge, and they want their own city where they can manage their own schools and stuff along that line. That's been a point of dispute, even though the area isn't necessarily at this point as Republican as it used to be. It's not in the district; it's in a different district. That's kind of characteristic.
Again, dark blue is just for continuity. Contiguity there. Go ahead.
I think Joe has something.
Yeah. This is bad news for Karen Carter Peterson here. More election day vote came in from East Baton Rouge. Now only 13 precincts remain for election day voting, and she stayed stagnant at 64% to 36% in total margin there. That's not good news for her. She needs to continue to get more from these election day precincts coming in here. Where this is starting to become less and less certain here, I think, for Karen Carter Peterson folks. She needs some more better results out there. We're not getting much here from there right now. I still want to see a little bit more here from Orleans Parish. We haven't really gotten much recently from there. But with how we're going right now, it's looking harder and harder. I think she needed to win more in East Baton Rouge. I don't know if she's going to get it right now, folks. And that's really, I think, what the problem might be here for Karen Carter Peterson in the end.
Yeah, and we just now saw another parish entirely in. I mentioned Assumption Parish is almost done. It is done now. 62% for Troy Carter, 37% for Karen Carter Peterson. That's the count. This is the parish where the Western advantage goes away for Carter Peterson. The ones north of this, the Baton Rouge area, Ascension, Iberville, are all still voting for her, but the ones that are south and east of Baton Rouge are not doing it. So this is basically where the start of that trail of Carter parishes has come from.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the river parishes, that Western advantage, like you said, completely wears off, because parishes like Jefferson, parishes like St. Charles, St. John the Baptist, all pretty strongly for Carter. Even Orleans Parish, portions below and above you look at above the river, it's not really considered a river parish because it's where most of the voters are. But again, I mean, I think you can expect a call soon because, again, most of the western areas where she's doing best are all reporting or close to all reporting, whereas Carter still has quite a few votes to pull out of Jefferson Parish and out of Orleans Parish. Kraz, do you have any thoughts on what's going on?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, I think what we're seeing here is kind of unexpected because Karen Carter Peterson is from New Orleans, right? Her state Senate district is in New Orleans. So if she can't get the margins there and she loses because she isn't getting the margin she needs in New Orleans, I mean, that's kind of a, I guess, indictment. I wouldn't say indictment on her campaign, but that's kind of disappointing from her point of view. I also think that, again, this could be a situation where in New Orleans, you've got the Republicans who are high turnout, wealthy, white, living in uptown, maybe more distant in out, for Troy Carter, even in a Dem versus Dem runoff, as opposed to a lot of more white classers in the western and northern part of the district. So, yeah, I mean, I think that this is kind of a bad sign for Karen Carter Peterson. She needs to get really, really good margins in the remaining New Orleans precincts in order to close the gap. But right now, I would much be
Eric, I know you want to go next.
So with the exception of East Baton Rouge, where Karen Carter Peterson is pulling about 30 points better, she's winning by about 30 points in East Baton Rouge. The rest of them are just not great. I mentioned the river parishes. She's only winning these. The ones she's even winning by around 2 to 3 points, 5 points at most. And these are low population areas. And then once you get to Assumption, St. James, St. John, St. Charles, not competitive at all. That she really needed to do better in Orleans Parish and in Jefferson Parish. But she's losing Jefferson 2-1 right now. And she's losing Orleans by 12. It's not enough to say she's done yet, but she would really need to be pulling better right now. And doing marginally better in some of these low population river parishes really does not make up for not doing very well in Orleans or in Jefferson. That's because that's where the people live. You can look at this geographically and say, this looks fairly close, but it's at the moment, it's a 15-point advantage for Troy Carter. She really needs to bump up those numbers soon, or else this is pretty much over. Not to say it's not competitive or that it's not closer, that it can't get closer. It just right now, I would much rather be Troy Carter. Just based on what's coming in. Could change. We could see more coming in for some of these wide areas could really, really, pull the weight for her. But at the moment, I would much rather be Troy Carter out of the two. And Washington Post is estimating. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I can't say.
They're estimating about 57% in. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and we just got a huge drop here from Washington Post. Now let me update.
Oh, wow.
We got a huge drop here from the Washington Post. I'm going to guess, we had a huge drop in the Orleans Parish. Karen Carter, with about half of precincts now in the Orleans Parish, according to the Washington Post. Troy Carter still leads about 53% to 47%, about half of the precincts in, so we do see a drop there. But he leads about 56 to 44 still in overall vote here. And again, East Baton Rouge almost in. So, there's just, I don't know if there's going to be a lot here. I just don't know if it's going to be enough. Maybe we'll wait and see on one more here from Orleans Parish. But, I just don't know whether or not there's going to be enough now with, still half the vote in here.
Yeah, it looks like this was a big dump of the. It looks like this is a big dump of the uptown precincts, the wider areas.
Yeah. That's what I was just going to mention. Everything else that's still out in Orleans right now is hostile territory for Karen Carter Peterson. All of those votes that we just saw drop, like Joe mentioned, are coming from the uptown precincts. So again, what's left? The central wards that are heavily black that are not reporting yet, and wards 7, 8, and 9 up top that are not reporting yet. And if anything, this is somewhat of an indictment as well, because if you look at those progressive white uptown precincts, I guarantee you Carter Peterson is either in the 50s range or in the 60s range if Eric wants to buzz over some of them. And the sheer fact Carter's even winning some of those precincts is kind of embarrassing.
Mm-hmm. Like, look at some of these along here. I mean, just in the center of these
Up
areas
on the
around.
border. Go on the border of the district in the northern part. Those are all white, majority white wards. So the fact that Carter's winning majority white wards, again, I don't think this changes anything because the spots left in Orleans, a parish that's still being lost by 6 or so by Karen Carter Peterson, is going to be strong for Carter.
Mm-hmm.
His
I just
home in
wanted
the
to
West
show this
Bank
from
is not
John
even
Coulion real
reporting.
quick. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, continue.
I was just going to show this. This is from John Coulion. I found this really, really insightful of what Karen Carter Peterson needed and what she's getting right now. Notice these river parishes. She's doing much better. She didn't need 37% in Assumption. She didn't need 51% in Iberville or all these. She's actually doing better than she needed in Jefferson. But you look at Orleans. She needed 59% of the vote. Right now, she's at 44%. Or
Yeah,
that was
Orleans
this is from a little bit back, but you get the idea. Even at right now 47% for her in Orleans, that's still 12 points behind the baseline of what she was needing. Even though she's doing much better in Baton Rouge, she needed to do 10 points better there than she's doing right now. So this thing isn't over, but it's not where she wants it to be. I think that's just the general baseline of the problems right now. And this really is going to come down to those black parishes. She needs to, judging by what's in right now, she's not getting what she needs.
The only black precincts I can see where she's doing well are those ones. It's hard to say. The Central Ward right there. If you go next to Chalamet, yeah, right there. Those are black. The other precincts to the west of that she's winning are Uptown white. Those are the only black precincts that she's winning in Orleans right now overall. And if you go below that to the south in Orleans Parish, that whole empty area right there, those are all black wards, not in yet. And Carter will be doing well there, at least if past trends hold.
And actually, I'm going to try to pull up a precinct map so we can show this exact racial split in Dave's redistricting if I can figure out.
Yeah, because I showed the ward map, but the split by precinct will be more insightful in this case.
Yeah, so let's look at Louisiana. I'm just going to not show the state Senate districts here because they're not really important. Looking at the votes here. Sorry, I got to resume this. I got a second screen up on my iPad here. Very useful feature from Apple, the hand cart or the sidecar thing. But yeah, sorry. So yeah, I mean, you can see the divide here, and I'm going to turn on the parish lines here. But you can see, if you compare how this is voting right now, let's see if I can get this to be perfect. There we go. So look at how they're voting right now. These marginally black parishes right here, or precincts, she's doing okay with. These areas around here, the white areas, some of these she's actually losing. Like look at right here. This is the border of the district, right? So look at where it's doing right there. Like just compare along the line, and you'll see the problem for her really is it's just she's not getting the votes you need in that portion of the district. And for that matter, I'm going to go ahead and show you what's up here. Notice that we talked about in East Baton Rouge, the way they drew it. These are all black areas, very, very African-American areas, and they're just doing, she's doing okay, but she isn't getting the exact blowout margin she needed. I think Joe has something to contribute here.
Yes, I do. So St. James Parish is now officially all in. Troy Carter officially won that 66 to 34% over Karen Carter Peterson, which is he did 2% better than he did in the early vote. He only won the early vote 64 to 36 with election day vote all in. He has won that.
I just put this in the chat, but ultimately, at the end of the day, Karen Carter Peterson underperformed in the one parish she couldn't afford to underperform in. And that will be what costs her the election. Because if she did as well in Orleans as she did in these other parishes, she would have won overall. If we look at the level of overperformance in some of these river parishes for the first round in terms of what she needed versus what she got,
But this goes back to the central mantra of elections is that land does not vote. She's doing better in geographical areas she did not think we did not think she would do better in, but she's doing worse in the one area that actually really matters in this election. And for that matter, it appears Jefferson or no, actually, I think Washington Post may be ahead of the actual Secretary of State website. They're saying that Iberville and Jefferson are all in. I'm not exactly sure. It says Jefferson says 16,000 votes in from Jefferson, 16,700. Yeah, they're ahead of it. I think they actually have the results because they're ahead of the website right now. They're ahead of the Secretary of State office. So it looks like Jefferson is all in and Iberville, according to Washington Post.
Yeah, I mean, if you look,
it's very close right now. The Washington Post is only up by about at least a little bit under 300 votes right now compared to what the website is saying right now. It's not really that far ahead. It's not really that far behind. But Jefferson Parish is apparently all in. Carter ended up winning there 67-33. You compare that to the early voting in Jefferson. He won that 66-34, so a 1% increase when you include in the election day vote from Jefferson. So that's good news there for Troy Carter. That's again, those are the type of that is a number that I think he will be very happy with when the night is done here. And now St. Charles Parish is probably all in according to Washington Post, and Carter won that 70% to 30%. That's a pretty big sweep. I think St. John the Baptist Parish was the one that had not fully come in yet. So all those Rivertown counties are now done. All we're waiting on is the finishing in East Baton Rouge and in New Orleans Parish. But
again, from what we're looking at now, it appears that the night is probably going to be over relatively soon for a couple of reasons. The first of which is 20%. 20% of the vote is left overall in this whole district to be counted, or 25 roughly, and about half, a little under half the vote in Orleans Parish. Now, again, like we mentioned, most of the remaining precincts will probably in Orleans Parish end up going to Troy Carter. So of the vote that's left, there simply aren't enough votes for someone like Karen Carter Peterson, barring some lopsided miracle, to overcome a 10-point deficit district-wide. So unfortunately for Karen Carter Peterson, and we're not making any stances or opinions on who we want to win or anything, but just from an objective standpoint, it's looking unlikely, and we should have a call pretty soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the record, according to the Washington Post, they're saying that all but East Baton Rouge and New Orleans or Orleans Parish are all in. St. John the Baptist is in 64% for Troy Carter. Troy Carter's consistently getting 60 to 70% in everything from Assumption to Jefferson. And so we feel like we could probably make a pretty we're just waiting a little bit longer to make sure these Orleans Parish does not change, but we're feeling fairly comfortable in the direction this thing is going. And I think some other people are following along with that as well. If Carter does pull this out, what are we all thinking this means for progressives? I know Joe has mentioned on Twitter, Southern progressives have had difficulty getting candidates through primaries in African-American areas. That's not necessarily been the case in places in the North or in the Midwest, like in Missouri. This would be kind of another example of the lack of ability to cross that finish line for more progressive candidates.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that I think for the entire South as a whole, I mean, even in Virginia, progressives have generally struggled to get through primaries there. And you see that in places like North Carolina, South Carolina, Democrats have been moderates. And I think a lot of the progressive hope is once these are a lot of older representatives in a lot of these seats. I think there was a hope that, once these representatives left, that there was going to be a shot here to get one of, progressive representatives in here. We've kind of seen that firsthand tonight in Louisiana, and I understand that Louisiana is very different with just the way it does things. But remember that Troy Carter came first in that all parties first election in the first place. So it's just a hard thing to say right now. I don't know. I'm not going to speak. I'm a Republican. I'm not going to speak for progressives here. But I've written an article on this before. Again, there's just continually showing to be a struggle here for progressive voters in these deep South districts that a lot of them depend on African American voters here, and the struggle kind of continues down south here for progressive voters, progressive representatives, and groups like Justice Democrats who want to try and get a foothold in the South. It just kind of continues to be a struggle.
Yep, and we're going to officially bring our coverage to a close here by calling Troy Carter as the winner of the runoff in the 2nd Congressional District. Once again, State Senator Troy Carter will win the runoff against Karen Carter Peterson in the 2nd District, as we expected before, by a similar margin to what we expected before, and will therefore take his seat in Congress to replace Cedric Richmond shortly after. And before we wrap up, Eric is going to talk a little bit more about how you can support our continuing coverage and our site.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so again, thank you guys for watching. We're closing off our coverage for the night. If you like what we do have a Patreon if you want to subscribe to that or look at that. I'll go ahead and put it in the chat here. You can also donate if you'd like to do it that way. We are growing. We're really excited with where we're going, and we're doing some really, really interesting things. So if you'd like to do that, we'd definitely appreciate it. Otherwise, if not, that's fine. Just continue to watch and support us through streams, podcasts, and the website. But really appreciate your support all night. Thank you for watching. First and foremost, stay tuned with us on the Elections Daily Twitter account. You can also find all of our handles on the video right here. We have our handles right next to our name. If you want to follow us, so you haven't already. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But again, thank you guys, and good night. Make sure you check our Twitter feed again for the official coverage post. And Kraz, do you have a final thing?
Just want to thank everyone for tuning in and continuing to support our streams. Hope they all enjoyed the coverage, and we'll be back in the near future for whatever comes next.
All right. Thank you, guys.